What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show. I'm your host, Sean Stevenson, and it is time for week 15. 15 games in a row, two more, and the Cleveland Browns are currently sitting at 9-4 as they travel to New Jersey to face off against the New York Giants in another primetime game. Back-to-back primetime games for the Cleveland Browns. I'm excited. I hope you are too. We're going to waste no time getting into the show. You guys can go ahead and give me a follow on social media. That's on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at SHWN Stevenson. Again, I'm your host, Sean Stevenson, as I have been for every single week of the show. And then also next week, I have some great guests joining me for the remaining two games of the season, which will be Brandon Little and another guest for the season finale of the Sports Illustrated Browns Digest Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show. Now, looking at the matchup this week, the Browns will be going against the 5-8 New York Giants. Looking at the Browns so far this season, they do have the 13th ranked offense and the 16th ranked defense. Looking at what the Browns have been able to do over the past few weeks has been relatively impressive. They did go on another 4-game winning streak, a feat that they had earlier in the season before losing to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then again, last week, their 4-game winning streak was snapped by the Baltimore Ravens in a heartbreaking loss in overtime. But the thing that we wanted to see most outside of a win last week was for the Browns to be competitive against a top-tier team, and especially one of their opponents in the AFC North between the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, they did go 0-2 this year against the Baltimore Ravens, but there's still an opportunity to get a win against the Pittsburgh Steelers in Week 17. Now, we may see a situation if the Steelers are able to clinch a certain spot, and say if they lose against the Colts or something like that, where they can't get the number 1 seed, we may see a situation where Ben Roethlisberger doesn't play. But until that happens, we're going to have the expectations that the Steelers are going to trot out a full team, as well as the Browns, if they can get healthy. And health is definitely one of the things that we need the Browns to get back healthy. The injury bug has been biting this team for a while now, and that's definitely been one of the issues, is that injuries across different personnel groupings have caused this team to really go to the depth of its roster and really the bottom of its roster to make a play. And at the end of the day, you know, the more depth you have and the better your players are along the roster, the higher your chances of being victorious on game day. Now, again, the Browns currently with their offense, they are the 3rd-ranked rushing attack, and you're starting to see that passing attack move up more and more each week. Baker Mayfield having tons of success. Obviously, last week was his highest passing game of the season. And of course, you just want to see him continue to build upon those performances, but hopefully they translate into more wins. On the flip side, you look at the New York Giants, and this is a team that was really struggling at the beginning of the year. You look at the fact that they're 1-7 heading into basically week 9, and they're now sitting at 5-8, going 4-1 in their past 5 previous contests, with a loss coming last week against the Arizona Cardinals. Now, in this situation, you want the Browns to be able to really, you know, assert their dominance on a team that has struggled early on. Now, they have found their footing, but you're looking at a situation where they don't have the greatest offense. They're already going to be without their starting quarterback in Daniel Jones, as he's dealing with both ankle and hamstring injury. So you're going against a backup quarterback. They're going to be missing 2 of their starting cornerbacks. And then they also don't run the ball a ton. I mean, they are the 17th ranked offense in terms of rushing, and they average 4.5 yards per carry, but they don't run the ball a lot. And then you look at their receiving weapons in Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard. These are players that haven't necessarily been world beaters by any sort. And the Giants are really a team that can be taken advantage of, you know, in the right matchup. You find advantageous matchups for your team in terms of the receivers or tight ends, especially that running back group of Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. We definitely want to see them have some success on the ground, but by no means will that be an easy feat, as the Giants' run defense is the 9th best in the league, and they're only allowing 3.9 yards per carry, which is the 7th lowest rate in the NFL. So they definitely do a good job in terms of limiting what teams can do on the ground. The Browns, on the other hand, they got absolutely demolished on the ground, but more because of the work that Lamar Jackson was able to do. And this defense is really struggled for the most part in terms of mobile quarterbacks, but you're not necessarily going to see that in this matchup with Colt McCoy being at the center position. Now, looking at the depth chart, the Browns, they're going to be without Wyatt Teller. They're starting right guard as he's dealing with an ankle injury. And this is relatively tough for a lot of Cleveland Browns fans because you first look at in the beginning of the season where he missed 3 games because of that calf strain. Now he's dealing with the ankle injury. And he's been, part of the glue of the offensive line. J.C. Trader, Joel Petonio, they've been playing great all season. Jack Conklin, as he got healthy, he was playing better and better. Jedrick Wills has been growing. It's just been that issue has necessarily been that right guard spot. And not necessarily an issue as if he hasn't been performing. It's just the fact that he hasn't been healthy consistently. So that's been causing the Browns offensive line to, mix and match a little bit. But more times than not, you'll see Chris Hubbard step into that spot. And last year in the situation that they had Chris Hubbard in the starting lineup, he didn't provide this type of play you want from a starting offensive lineman. But, new offensive scheme, he's definitely been playing better. Again, on that reworked contract where he's not getting paid as much money as in previous years. And you just want to see him really be a consistent player on that interior for this Browns offensive line. Looking at the rest of the injury report, Andrew Sendejo, he's going to be out with the concussion. Many of you may remember that hit that he had on J.K. Dobbins just short of the end zone where he threw his whole body into J.K. Dobbins. Unfortunately, wasn't able to keep him out of the end zone, but he did go head first. And in that play, you could pretty much tell that there was a potential of him having concussion. And as he's in concussion protocol, it's likely they'll see him play. There's a lot of questionable players this week as well. You look at receiver Kadero Hodge. He's still dealing with that hamstring injury. Tight end Austin Hooper. He also has a neck injury. Listen to this questionable injury that carries over from last week. Then you have cornerbacks Kevin Johnson and Denzel Ward. Kevin Johnson is currently dealing with a groin injury. Then, of course, Denzel Ward is still dealing with that calf strain, similar to what Wyatt Teller had earlier in the season. Now, of these injuries, the ones that you really want to pay the most attention to is definitely Austin Hooper, Kevin Johnson, and Denzel Ward. Denzel Ward, one, because he's our starting corner, and you want to see him get healthy heading into the playoffs, especially that matchup against Pittsburgh. If he doesn't play a lot of snaps or plays at all this week, you want Denzel Ward healthy because we've seen the inconsistencies and the issues that have really shown up on the third level and on the back end of this defense. They haven't been very consistent, and that's definitely been one of the issues with the Browns so far, is that we have a very good understanding that this defense really isn't that good. Really, it comes down to personnel where they just don't have a lot. They're trying to overcome injuries. They lost Grant Dale Pitt. Greedy Williams hasn't played at all this season. And Denzel Ward now dealing with his calf injury. You really just want to see, them get healthy on the back end. In that situation, that should give defensive coordinator Joe Woods a little bit more confidence heading into a playoff matchup. And then lastly, tight end David Njoku, he's listed as questionable after suffering a knee injury on Friday. So we're hoping that he's healthy as well to continue in this matchup. Looking at the Giants, cornerbacks, Darnell Holmes and James Bradbury, their starting 2 corners, are actually going to be out this week. Darnell Holmes, he's out with a knee injury. And then Bradbury, that's going to be a really big hole for this Giants secondary as he's actually out, not due because of injury, but because of a positive COVID test late in the week. And he won't be able to quarantine in time in order to make this matchup. So this may be another prime opportunity for Baker Mayfield to come out, really throw the ball with success, and continue to build upon the performances that he's had over the past 2 weeks. Looking at their quarterback position, even though Daniel Jones' listed as questionable, there's pretty much a guarantee that we're going to see Colt McCoy. Now, in the situation that McCoy does get hurt, there's a slight chance that we may see Daniel Jones if they don't decide to turn to David Webb, who was promoted earlier this week. And then right guard Kevin Zeitler, a former Brown, he's dealing with a shoulder injury, listed as questionable. And also both their tight ends, Evan Ingram and Caden Smith, they're both listed as questionable with a knee injury. Looking at the depth chart, again, Colt McCoy, you look at Wayne Gallum, he's a player that they've really been relying on since Saquon Barkley went down with that ACL injury. They do use a fullback every once in a while with Elijah Penny, But this receiver core is going to be that group that's going to probably get a bulk of the target share in terms of the passing game. You look at Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, Golden Tate. Those are, names that we've seen constantly throughout the Giants, been able to make some plays. And then their fourth receiver, Austin Mack, a former Buckeye, is another player that can make some plays when given an opportunity. Now, in the situation that either Ingram or Caden Smith is not able to go at tight end, expect Levine Toilolo to come in. Really big tight end target. That's one of the things that really have given the Browns some issues, are tight ends this season. And Levine Toilolo, he's not the fastest guy, but he's a very big target, being 6'8" at that tight end position. He'll be able to be a red zone target for Colt McCoy, who's been known to target his tight ends throughout his NFL career. Looking at their offensive line, you do have Andrew Thomas, the number 1 offensive tackle, taken off the board back in the 2020 draft this year. So far, he hasn't necessarily performed as the best tackle in this draft class. Luckily, the Browns have been able to get some success with Jedrick Wills at that left tackle positions. Now, I would definitely say throughout their careers, you'll look at Andrew Thomas, Tristan Wirfs, who's on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then also Mekhi Becton for the New York Jets, as players that will always be compared to Jedrick Wills, because the 2020 draft class was really known as a top-tier tackle class in terms of what went at the top of the draft. And then also, of course, the receivers as well, with tons of receivers going in the 2020 draft. Looking at the rest of their offensive line, they do have Shane Lumox. There's been kind of a toss-up with him between him and Will Hernandez at that guard position. Shane Lamo has been giving majority of those snaps at that left guard spot, and he'll likely start again this week. You have Nick Gates. Again, Kevin Zeitler, a former Brown. He's going to be listed as questionable. Most likely he's going to go. And then also right tackle Cameron Fleming, offensive lineman that they signed in free agency from the New England Patriots. Looking at their defense, again, this is a group that has really performed at a higher level as the season has went on. Again, their run defense is really good because of the players they do have up front. Really find a lot of opportunities to do so. You look at Dexter Lawrence, one of those Power Rangers from the Clemson front four that won a national championship a few years ago. Also, defensive tackle Leonard Williams, who they signed from the New York Jets in free agency, has always been a stout run presence at that defensive tackle position. And then also at nose, they do have Dalvin Tomlinson, another great player that's adept at stopping the run in the middle of the field, another big body. And then you look at Jabal Sheard, another former Browns player that's going to be playing in this matchup. He comes in really passing situations. They use more of that typical 4-3, but you see a lot of teams going to their nickel with more defensive back packages. That may be an issue with the Giants when you look at their back end of their secondary. But of course, they do have Tay Crowder, Blake Martinez, someone they signed from free agency, a former Green Bay Packer that led the NFL in tackles a couple seasons ago, and then Carter Coughlin as well. You look at the back end of their secondary, you have Isaac Yalaudom, who's their third corner essentially, or second corner, depending on who's playing that week. He's now stepped into that number 1 cornerback role. And then Julian Love, a player that typically plays free safety, he now steps up, from that nickel role that he's played a lot this season as that slot corner. Now he's basically looking at being their corner number 2. In that situation, that Julian Love now has to play those, increased amount of snaps on the outside. That now leaves more opportunities potentially for players that's playing in the slot. Jarvis Landry, Rashard Higgins, they may be in line for another big game as they're dealing with a team that's depleted at that cornerback position compared to last week, where you look at Marcus Peters and Marlon Humphreys, 2 very talented cornerbacks, but the Browns were able to take advantage of that secondary of the Baltimore Ravens once a couple of those players went down with injury. Now, I'm pretty positive that Kevin Stefanski is going to figure out a way to attack who's ever going to be at that nickelback position. You look at potentially Logan Ryan, who's going to be their starting free safety, as that player that typically slides down into that nickel role, covering the receiver in the slot. In that situation that he comes out of his free safety spot, then you expect Xavier McKinney to come in and play that free safety role. Now, one of the situations that the Giants placed himself in, with McKinney now being that starting free safety in certain packages, is that he hasn't played a lot this season. He's had increased snaps over the last 3 weeks, but he necessarily hasn't been missing snaps because of, per se, injury. It's just the fact that he hasn't been playing well. A former second-round pick out of Alabama, Logan Ryan really came in and added a veteran presence on that back end. So, now you look at a situation where the tight ends could have a bigger impact this week with Xavier McKinney now in that free safety spot and needing someone to come down. That may be a matchup that they like to exploit, or potentially Nate Ebner, a strong safety, more of a special teams ace. He may be another player that may come in and have increased defensive snaps this week, again, with them missing two of their starting cornerbacks in Darnay and James Bradbury. Again, the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show is brought to you by and sponsored by Focus Clothing. Focus Clothing is a small Black-owned apparel company in Cleveland. Take advantage of their holiday sale and get yourself a new Focus trucker hat. Shop today at focusclothingcle.com. That is focusclothingcle.com. Now, looking at the quarterback matchup, this is going to be some familiar names for you. Obviously, Baker Mayfield's coming back in after a performance last week where he had over 340 yards passing against the Baltimore Ravens, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. And in that game last week, Baker Mayfield really showed he's starting to regain his confidence. And his confidence was something that was somewhat in question early in the season. But as he began to learn the playbook and being able to go through his reads and understand which targets are going to be open against certain coverage or really take advantage of different personnel matchups, that's when Mayfield has been at his best. Kevin Stefanski has obviously been able to really maximize his potential and his skill set, getting him out, on rollouts, bootlegs, speed outs. These are the different type of plays that you see constantly throughout the game, especially off of play action. So far this season, Baker Mayfield is one of the most accurate passers in the NFL off of play action, and we're going to continue to see that with success. And one of the reasons why we see it happen with so much success and so efficiently is because of the run game. Even in situations where the run game hasn't been as dominant as it was early in the year, the threat of having both Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt has been the reason that the play action has been so successful. And with that, getting Mayfield out on the move, he's able to get that fast ball out, find Jarvis Landry in short out routes, being able to get check downs to allow receivers to run up to keep drives moving. And that's just something that we want to continue to see in this matchup. Now, there aren't a lot of players that can really get after the quarterback on this New York Giants defense, and you want to see Mayfield look calm and poised in the pocket. And we've really seen it over the last few weeks. You look at his performance against the Tennessee Titans in the first half. The execution by the offense was really, predicated on Mayfield's ability to deliver the ball accurately and on time. And he was able to do that a lot. And you look at last week against the Baltimore Ravens, that's a situation where he didn't necessarily struggle, but there weren't too many opportunities, for him to make mistakes and, not really suffer from it. And the biggest one, obviously, was the interception for I believe it was a pick six. I think he might have been tackled. Yeah, he was tackled early of the goal line. But, that interception where it was, again, just him not using his eyes appropriately and staring down one target. You see the defensive lineman come off the line, drop back in the zone, and then he basically threw the ball right to him. He was showing the ability to take care of the ball pretty much every week. Outside of those bad weather games, you look at Jacksonville, Tennessee, those are games where he didn't have an interception. He made multiple games without throwing a pick. And as long as Baker Mayfield can continue to have that success throwing the ball and not turn the ball over, that's where we're really going to see the most benefit of Baker Mayfield being under center. For him to continue to show his growth, you want to see him to continue to take care of the ball and to, continue to refine that immaculate accuracy that he had back in Oklahoma that made him a Heisman Trophy winner. If he's able to do that, we'll really see this Browns offense to continue to take the next step, because the passing offense has really been that one area of the offense that wasn't really up to par compared to them running the ball, with them being a lower ranked unit. But as the season has gone on, Mayfield has really been able to rekindle, himself and find that success. Looking at the opposite side of the field, Colt McCoy is going to be that player, that really you don't know what to expect from him. They did win that weird game against the Seattle Seahawks back in week 13. And, they really want to be that team that just runs the ball, plays some defense, control the clock, and don't really have a lot of turnovers. Even when Daniel Jones was really in with this offense, when they started turning it around and winning some games, Daniel Jones was really making a lot of plays with his legs more than with his arm. And this is I don't believe this is going to be a matchup where you're going to see Colt McCoy, outrun the Browns defense similar to Lamar Jackson did, because he's not that type of player. But since leaving the Browns, going to Washington in that matchup, you look at him and what he's been able to do throughout his career. He's really, even during college, his time in Texas, he really flourished the most when he didn't turn the ball over. He's going to be in a West Coast sort of style offense, as he doesn't really have the greatest ability to extend the ball down the field, which has been one of the areas of weakness for this Browns defense. And again, you're not going to see too many situations where, the play breaks down, he scrambles, looks as much of a running threat. And again, that's another issue that the Browns secondary has struggled with. McCoy is really going to have to, be in a situation where he either has to throw the ball accurately against zone coverage or, find success throwing the ball against man. And his arm talent necessarily isn't the greatest in order to, win those matchups consistently. We just haven't seen that from Colt McCoy throughout his career. And also in situations where he gets pressured, he's shown the ability to, be a little careless with the football, whether it be fumbles or, throwing it to tight windows and forcing some interceptions. This may be another one of those games where we see the Browns secondary, force a couple, interceptions or potentially some defensive back blitzes that put Colt McCoy in a tough situation. But, McCoy, again, he's going to really have to step up for the Giants offense and find some consistency in terms of throwing the ball and throwing his receivers open. Now, when I look at Baker Mayfield, how will he command the offense for the rest of the season? And that's one of the things that we want to see continue to really grow, throughout this season. When I watch Baker Mayfield and his command of the offense early in the year, he didn't necessarily seem comfortable. Now that he's really had almost a full season, under this offensive scheme where the play action is going to be the basis of him and being a mobile quarterback, there's not a lot of situations where Baker Mayfield is stuck in the pocket and he has to force himself to be a pocket passer. Now, in those situations where, he's out in the shotgun in empty formations, he's done a brilliant job of getting the ball out quickly and finding his targets. But also on the flip side, we've seen him have the highest time of holding the ball this season. But really what you've noticed between last year and this season with the time of him holding the ball is how those plays have forced him to really hold the ball and survey the field, in a smart and efficient manner. When you look at last year when he was holding the ball, that typically resulted in an interception. And when you saw him have the most success was on run pass options, quick screens, just getting the ball quickly out of his hands, mostly because the offensive line didn't allow him a lot of time to really, take big shot plays down the field because he didn't have enough time. Now you look at Kevin Stefanski's offense and what he's been able to do with the play action. That's really been the main reason why he has such a high hold the ball time this season. in delivering the ball down the field. You'll see a lot of situations where a receiver that's on the strong side of a formation run across the formation against the weak side and see Baker Mayfield deliver a ball on time across the field. Find some tight ends that's running across the weak side of the formation across the field. And, typically you do have to hold the ball a little bit longer. But in those situations when those deep shot plays aren't available or someone's not able to get open downfield, he's been making the smart play to check the ball down. And, I personally want to see Baker Mayfield be able to continue to command the offense in situations where, say, if the Browns need to throw the ball, they feel confident putting it in his hands to march the team down the field, get some points, and then also just continue to have that success that he's had in the red zone. There hasn't been a single red zone interception so far from Baker Mayfield this season. Yes, there's been missed throws. Yes, there's been, missed targets, in the red zone where he's just missing some open receivers. But that happens, and he's, attempting to clean that up. But for him to continue to boost that confidence, with him being a franchise quarterback, we want to see him continue to take care of the ball in the red zone. Because a situation where there's an interception in the red zone, that can really make the difference between, a touchdown, 3 points, or potentially a 10-point swing where you take out a, no field goal and the other team scores 7. So, really what you want to see from Mayfield this season is for him to continue to have that success, running this offense, being able to extend drives, and then also in situations where he has a good first half to find that consistency in the second half. That was something that we look at in the Tennessee Titans game where they were up 38-7, and then the second half they only scored 3 points. Now, obviously, the defense did give up a lot of points in that second half, but on the same token, if you're able to put up 38 in the first half, you should still be able to put up points in the second half against a team that necessarily didn't change their defensive scheme too much. Being able to throw the ball consistently and fix that. It's kind of becoming an issue where he tries to get the ball out too soon, and he's been continuing that streak of intentional grounding. That's something where it just comes down to coaching and understanding you're not out of the tackle box yet, or just being able to get the ball close to receiver to miss out, on those opportunities. Well, we're not in a situation where the Browns offense is at 3rd and long, 3rd and 15, 3rd and 18, which was starting to come up, over the past few weeks. But in the situation that Baker Mayfield has been in those 3rd and longs, he's been able to deliver the ball accurately and on time to the receiver in order to convert a long 3rd down. Now, when I look at the Giants, this is a interesting matchup because of what position Freddie Kitchens is going to be in. Now, Freddie Kitchens, obviously we know, was the Browns head coach last year. The Browns ended up finishing 6-10, very, very underwhelmingly, based off of the talent that they had on that roster, and it really just came down to coaching. Freddie Kitchens signs with the New York Giants as a tight ends coach this offseason. Jason Garrett tests positive for COVID-19, and now we're in a situation where Freddie Kitchens, in his first game back against the Cleveland Browns, he's now going to be the offensive coordinator. And in that situation, the worst possible thing to happen to the Browns is for Freddie Kitchens to get a win against the Browns in the situation where the Giants don't have Daniel Jones. They don't have Saquon Barkley. The Browns are 9-4 and knocking on the door of their first playoff berth since 2002. Now you're starting to play for more than just your playoff life. Now your pride is somewhat on the line, where you look at what Freddie Kitchens was able to do, with the Browns as a head coach. Now, I would not be surprised at all if the Giants are able to come out and potentially score 7, because Freddie Kitchens, as offensive play caller, does a very good job of scripting up his first, 10 plays, 15 maybe. But after he gets out of those scripted plays, in the first couple of drives of the game, then it starts to get a little bit more questionable. Now, there's been people in the media saying, obviously it's a different team, and they have an offense that's still going to be predicated on what Jason Garrett did, but I'm sure he's going to have, somewhat some flexibility to, have a little impact in terms of the scripting of this game, understanding, the prior relationship that Freddie Kitchens has with this organization. In the situation that the Giants offense finds some success, how much can you really give that to Freddie Kitchens? Is it going to be all just his play calling? Is it really going to be how much impact he has? And then also I kind of look at how is Freddie Kitchens really going to, handle his emotions in this situation where you were just a head coach and now you're facing off against a team that fired you after one season. And it gives me slight Hugh Jackson vibes after they relieved him of his head coaching spot, facing off against the Browns the first time after going with the Cincinnati Bengals. I believe he can find some connection within this matchup, but it really just comes down to Joe Woods and his ability to have a good scheme against his offense that's really just undermanned and doesn't have a lot of talent across this offense. Freddie Kitchens, as his time as the Browns offensive coordinator back in 2018, he really did find some success with Baker Mayfield as they went 5-3 to end that season in Baker Mayfield's rookie year. And really, he found a lot of that success from simplifying the offense, understanding, okay, Baker, this is what you do well. And I fully expect him to revisit that type of offensive calling scheme with Colt McCoy, understanding Colt McCoy is a West Coast offense quarterback. He's going to look to get the ball out quickly. When you kind of look at Joe Woods' scheme, yes, he blitzes, but he doesn't blitz a lot. He's one of those defensive coordinators that understands his personnel groupings aren't the best, so he likes to keep things in front of him, and then he wants his defensive backs and linebackers to come up, make tackles, and really force team to have long, sustained drives. In that situation, a West Coast offense is really set up to flourish against that type of defensive scheme. What is that really going to consist of? A lot of screens, slants, drags, out routes, hitches, a lot of quick plays that allows the quarterback to get the ball out of his hands quickly. And again, you look at Baker Mayfield's rookie year when Kitchens was calling the plays. RPO and quick plays that allowed him to get the ball out of his hands quickly is where Baker Mayfield had most of his success when they went on that winning streak to end the season in his rookie year. Colt McCoy can find some ways to beat you underneath, but he's not really going to be that player to beat you deep down the field with his deep ball because it's never really been consistent, even dating back to his time in college. So that's really where you want to see, Joe Woods alter his scheme a little bit to be more aggressive. Yes, we understand that this grouping for the Cleveland Browns isn't the greatest in the secondary, but Freddie Kitchens, a lot of people may not like him, but the guy's not an idiot. Obviously, you're not giving a head coaching job without having some sense of how to have a successful offense. And really the biggest difference between what we saw that rookie season to last year to this year was really just discipline. The reason why the Browns were able to be so successful in that time after relieving Hugh Jackson is that Greg Williams is a coach that was really a no nonsense type of defensive coordinator and head coach as an interim head coach at the time, where he's not going to allow a lot of things to happen. Kitchens, on the other hand, had a very undisciplined team, and that's really the reason why the Browns lost a lot of games last year. Outside of his inconsistent play calling, was the fact that the team wasn't disciplined. Now you look at Joe Judge, the head coach, coming over from New England Patriots. You look at Bill Belichick and really how he's ran his team. Discipline is really going to be the fourfold for a lot of this team. So in this situation where we watch Freddie Kitchens call plays, expect him to really take advantage of that quick passing game and hope that the Browns defense can be inconsistent in terms of their tackling. Now, when I look at, the Browns, there's going to be some things that we're going to want to see improve, and really it's not allowing too much of the Browns emotions of, former players, coaches to really overcome or overshadow everything else about what this matchup is supposed to be about. This matchup is about getting back on track in terms of getting another W, moving to 10-4, and getting closer to locking down a playoff spot. Now, they can't clinch a playoff berth tonight, but it begins with winning this game, winning next week against the Jets, and then heading into Pittsburgh with potentially a 11-4 record and really showing your ability to be a team that can win the games you're supposed to win and then be competitive against top tier teams. Now, we're just going to take a quick intermission for a second because the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show is brought to you by Sports Illustrated Browns Digest. Check out their website every single day for team news, game day threads, and featured content at si.com/NFL/Browns. Today, we will have a live game thread over on the Sports Illustrated website starting at it's actually up right now. Starting at kickoff, there will be game updates throughout the game with myself, Pete Smith, and Brandon Little as well. You guys can join the conversation. Let me know your thoughts, score predictions, all that as I update the game throughout the entire game from the first kickoff to the final whistle. Now, getting back into it, what sort of impact are Browns players going to have, in this matchup? And there's, tons of Browns players sprinkled throughout this roster that are really going to have some type of impact. Colt McCoy, obviously, former Browns rookie, had his highest graded Pro Football Focus season was his rookie year back in 2010, which seems like such a long time ago for the Browns. Colt McCoy drafted by them. Dion Lewis. Now, many of us remember Dion Lewis for having his biggest impact with the New England Patriots, but before that time, he was with the Cleveland Browns. So, Dion Lewis, that's another player that you look at that it's going to have some impact this game. Kevin Zeitler from the Odell Beckham Jr. trade, he's going to have an impact in this game in our starting offensive lineup. Jabbar Sheard, another Browns player, he's going to be that starting edge, rush player for that Giants defense. You look at Jabril Peppers, another player on the back end of that Giants defense. A lot of these Browns players, they don't have a lot of success with the Browns. They move on to some other teams, find some success. And when, for some reason, once they go up against the Browns, they're able to, channel all that negative energy and anger and hate from the Browns. Because a lot of the time, these players, when they were with the Browns, these weren't teams that had a lot of success. Do you have some type of vendetta against the team? Potentially. It's very tough for someone to, put their heart and soul, into a team and an organization in the city. And then, of course, either you're not giving a contract or you're not able to win a lot of games. And, this could be a situation where, they play a little bit harder this week just because they are going against that former team. Or, some players that potentially could have been on the Browns draft board and they weren't drafted by the Browns. Things like that fuel a lot of these players. And, maybe Jabril Peppers has a big game. I look at the fact that at his time as a Browns player, he didn't find out about the Odell Beckham trade, that he was part of the trade until he checked on Twitter and saw that, the Browns traded for Odell Beckham. He's thinking that, cool, we have a new player, and then he happens to be part of that trading package. So, those are things that you look at in terms of, how these matchups really, pump up a player that may, have them have a better matchup essentially and a better performance. And then on the flip side, you look at Olivier Vernon, him going against the Giants since being traded. That's another big, matchup for him. And against that Giants offensive line that, is a little bit questionable. You want to see the Browns defensive line get a little bit more pass rush this week against a weaker team in terms of their offensive line. You want to see growth in that. But, I expect some Browns players to come out, potentially Dion Lewis to have maybe, a big play here. But I believe if any player is going to have a big impact, it's likely going to be Jabril Peppers, especially with the players that they're missing in that secondary on the third level, especially in that cornerback group. Now, when I look at the defense, more times than not, I really look at Joe Woods. And during his time with the Broncos, he had some solid defenses. Typically, they were average in terms of defensive ranking, and that's really where the Browns are now. They're a pretty average defense. They're very poor on the back end, obviously, but they try to make up for it in the front four, sometimes the front seven, depending on how they're playing. But I feel, outside of just personnel, really the scheme is very important. And one of the things that I feel like the Browns need to improve on the most is how Joe Woods calls his defenses on a weekly basis. And really heading into the playoffs is going to be the biggest thing, is his ability to really stop the pass, or even just contain it. There's been too many times where bad teams have been able to throw the ball and have shootouts against the Browns. The Bengals, they've been able to score 30 points. The Jacksonville Jaguars with Mike Glennon were able to throw the ball with success. The Tennessee Titans, they weren't able to do much in the first half, but in that second half, there were 2 series where they scored in 3 plays and 4 plays right after the second half. Just being able to, I would really say, find an identity. And that was something that the Browns kind of lacked last year on offense with Freddie Kitchen calling his plays. You just didn't really know the identity of the offense. Now you look at this year and you really don't know the identity of the defense. Yes, I get it. Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward really are the 2 best players on the defense and really have the biggest impact. You finally started to get a little bit more consistent play in the safety group when Ronnie Harrison came in. He goes out with the injury. Now you rely more on Carl Joseph, and you don't have Andrew Sendejo this week. So now you look at Sheldrick Redwine as a player that you have, more responsibility and more snaps this week. I would say really the biggest thing for Joe Woods and his defense, heading into the playoffs, is being a little bit more aggressive. I feel like there's too many times where, he'll blitz in certain situations where, it's an obvious passing down, but we don't see those blitzes constantly throughout the game. Now, it may be a situation where he's not too confident in his secondary, but there's a lot of times where you'll see players run free or get lost in the secondary after play breaks down. If you're blitzing, a lot of times there's not a lot of situations where quarterbacks are able to run free because the pocket collapses so quickly. In that situation, that's where you really want to see him step up and change his play calling to be a little bit more aggressive. Send the linebackers. You can't always rely on the front 4 to be that personnel grouping to really get pressure on the quarterback. And that's something that we need to see change, over the next few weeks, see him get a little bit more aggressive. Now, does it need to be blitzing, on like the last play of the game, like Greg Williams against the New York Jets? When they were up against the Raiders? No, it doesn't need to be that sort of situation. But you definitely want to see, Joe Woods be just slightly more aggressive and not just always play back. And a lot of times where you have teams that just like to sit back in zone and keep things in front of them, defensive coordinators really know how to set you up for a tick, 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 tick shot down the field. And typically those shots down the field have given the Browns their biggest weakness on that third level are those shot plays down the field. So, really, I look at Joe Woods to get a little bit more aggressive, be more confident in his play calling, and help this defense find its identity. Turnovers have been nice, but those turnovers have really come against teams that have really been, teams that the Browns should beat. Against the top level competition, you look at the Raiders, you look at the Ravens, you look at the Steelers, the Titans, I would say is a little bit of an anomaly. Those teams and those matchups, the Browns don't get a lot of turnovers. It's nice for you to intercept Joe Burrow or intercept Deshaun Watson or play good against a, imploding Carson Wentz. But when you're going against, a good quarterback, those are the times you want to see those, interceptions, those fumbles, those big time plays come up. And we really haven't seen that from this defense. And I personally put a lot of that on the defensive scheme. So, on the flip side, where you look at it, now you ask yourself, what does the defense need to be more consistent? And it becomes more of a personnel versus scheme discussion. So when you break it down to, multiple levels of the defense, you look at the front 4. We've been able to find a little bit more consistency from the front 4 outside of Myles Garrett. Olivier Vernon, when Myles Garrett was dealing with injury, definitely stepped up and really made his impact, for the money that he was getting paid. But now it's in a situation where he's likely not going to be with the team next year. But, while he's still with us this season, Olivier Vernon is continuing to be that veteran presence that stepped up in big time moments. And, obviously we hope that he can continue that going into the playoff run. Now you look at the interior. Sheldon Richardson has been great. He's been getting after the quarterback. He's been starting run defense. And he's just really been that veteran voice that the defense needs to really hold themselves together in situations, to really be more of a bend and don't break. But there's also been some situations where the defense has broken, and that's caused some issues. So now in the situation that he's playing better, now you look at the other pieces around Sheldon Richardson, Olivier Vernon, and Myles Garrett. Larry Ogunjobi is on his contract year. Outside of the beginning of the season, we really haven't heard his name called a lot. This time of the season, now that we're, hitting the end of December and then January, where we're potentially maybe playing a playoff game, you want to see Larry Ogunjobi step up and really make an impact. Now, in this situation that he does, yes, he could potentially work himself into a new contract with the Browns, but he's also really playing for his future with potentially another team if Andrew Berry doesn't offer him another contract. So you really want him to play well. There's nothing wrong with, the Browns kind of getting into a bidding war for interior defensive linemen. But in the same situation, you don't want him to play poorly and then, he gets a more team-friendly contract next year. You want him to really take advantage of the fact he's on a contract year and really step up and show why he deserves a new contract with this team. And, this may be a good opportunity. Wayne Gallman isn't the greatest running back. The Jets don't really have much of a semblance of a run game over there. And, the Steelers really don't commit to running the ball much either. And they're really showing that they're not as strong as a team as many people thought they were. So, you want to see him step up. And then also in the rotation, it was lovely to see Vincent Taylor come in and that special teams group and block a kick and really open up the game for the Browns on that field goal or extra point attempt against the Ravens last week. You want to see him come in and make a little bit more impact in terms of the run defense. Also, Jordan Elliott, he's been playing decent as a rookie. He hasn't really shown a ton, but can he really, pick it up and get a little bit more interior pass rush, what he was really drafted to do? He's been a little bit inconsistent in terms of that, but he has also shown some ability to find some success in terms of, defending the run on the interior. Then you move back to the linebacking group. BJ Goodson has really grown and shown that he can be a player that, the Browns defense can count on, which has been really nice. And you want to see him continue to be that vocal leader in the middle of that Browns defense. He definitely showed he wanted to improve in his pass coverage, because if you remember early in the season, Goodson really struggled in terms of what he was able to do for this Browns defense in terms of being able to cover the deep middle. He's been able to do that a little bit more consistently. Now, I look at Malcolm Smith and Sione Takitaki as two solid players that has been able to excel in their role. Malcolm Smith being that coverage linebacker in passing situations. He's been arguably one of the best linebackers for this Browns defense. Sione Takitaki has been outstanding in run coverage. Doesn't really do a lot in terms of pass defense, but they use him really in early downs and able to set the edge as that strong side linebacker. And he's continued to grow in that role, something that we wanted to see after not really having many slaps last season. My player that really needs to step up this week and really for the rest of the season, again, is Mack Wilson. And now you see this comment, is Mack Wilson a healthy scratch? He is this week. Mack Wilson has been that player that has been so inconsistent. His discipline on defense, he's never really in the right run fit. He overcommits on run plays. He's always kind of a step behind in pass coverage. He always just kind of wants to go out there and just hit somebody. I talked about that with a colleague earlier today. He's been that player that the Browns relied so much on last season, and he's starting to somehow take steps backwards. As you go on in your NFL career, teams should feel more comfortable with you as that player that can come in and really, solidify that linebacking core. We haven't got that out of Mack Wilson. He had to step in for Christian Kursky last year because of the pectoral injury he suffered. He leaves for Green Bay in free agency, and now you really have a prime opportunity to take that next step in your career as a linebacker. You've never really shown it. So in that situation, in that personnel group, now Mack Wilson, you have to improve and show, I can be that linebacker that can play in coverage, cover tight ends, and also come down and run support. But it really comes down to his eye discipline, understanding, this is where I need to be, making sure you're in the right run fit. There was a play just last week against the Ravens where his hole was opened up because he overcommitted, and now you leave an open lane for, Lamar Jackson to run into the end zone or J.K. Dobbins to have a big run down the field. A lot of those plays it comes down to linebackers being in the right run fit, and they just weren't making those right plays. And again, I look at Mack Wilson to be that personnel player that needs to improve when he's on the field. You look at this secondary as well, cornerback groups. Terrence Mitchell, I feel like, is one of those few players that kind of gets the, okay, you're really more of a cornerback 2, being forced into a cornerback 1 role when Denzel Ward has been out, but he's been serviceable as that cornerback 2. Kevin Johnson, he's been kind of wishy-washy with some of his performances, really being undisciplined and just getting bad penalties against him. And you saw a lot of flags early in the Ravens game where the team was kind of getting ticky-tacky calls. But a lot of those, plays could be avoided with disciplined play. You want to see Kevin Johnson be more consistent in terms of his man coverage. And then you look at the third level with Carl Joseph and really Sheldrick Redwine this week. Carl Joseph has done a decent job in terms of his run coverage. I feel he may be one of those players that, as he gets a little bit healthier and more comfortable in his defensive scheme, he may be back next year as he's really starting to pick up and be more of a run defending presence as that box safety. And maybe it might work out a little bit more when you have Grant Delpit come back, if Ronnie Harrison isn't that player that they want to be that box safety, or if Joe Woods wants to really use more of that big nickel package that we fully expected him to use this season. That could really be reliant on what Carl Joseph shows for the rest of this season. So he's going to be a player that, you want to watch. And then Sheldrick Redwine, this may be an opportunity for him with Sendejo out to really work himself into more reps on that back end of that secondary, where Joe Woods feels a little bit more confident to allow him to have more snaps on that third level with Andrew Sendejo out. Again, the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show is sponsored by Focus Clothing. Focus Clothing is a small Black-owned apparel company in Cleveland. You can take advantage of their holiday sale and gift a premium fabric crop hoodie for a family member or your lovely lady friend. Shop today at focusclothingcle.com. They do have clothes for teens as well. And also they have released new hoodies with their new Focus Friends logo sweatshirt, now available on the website. You can check that out at focusclothingcle.com/shop.
Who said that t-shirt was only for the summer?
So one of the questions that I really wanted to kind of look at is, are the Browns good enough to overcome injuries in a playoff matchup? Now, we've seen, throughout this season, them able to come out and get wins against competition without Myles Garrett, without Denzel Ward, even a game without both of them. And it really required other players to step up. Now, in a situation, say if they go against, say, the Buffalo Bills or the Tennessee Titans, potentially the Indianapolis Colts, I feel like the Browns, as of right now, and the questionable defense that they have, it gets a lot harder, for them to really come up and, win that matchup now. They do have the talent to be successful in a playoff matchup. If, say, if Myles Garrett is out, I don't believe they have the talent to overcome Myles Garrett being out, just because what he creates in terms of mismatches against the opposing offense and how they always have to pay attention to him on the offensive line in terms of how they decide to run the ball or pass the ball. And he gets to the quarterback so quickly that really helps out the secondary. Now, with Denzel Ward and his presence, he does a really good job of help lock down that number one receiver. And, there aren't too many teams that just have this overly dominant number one receiver in the matchup. If you look at potentially the Indianapolis Colts, I would definitely say against the Buffalo Bills, that's a situation where you definitely need Denzel Ward to go against a Stephon Diggs. The Tennessee Titans, I would say that A.J. Brown is a matchup that you will want to see Denzel Ward in. So, depending on what injury it is, say if potentially B.J. Goodson is out, or that may be something they may be able to overcome. But in a situation where you see, like, say if a Jarvis Landry goes down or Nick Chubb, those are players that I feel like are irreplaceable for the current state of the Browns, and may be a little bit too difficult for them to overcome. So really, they may have the ability to come over some injuries, but as of right now, with how injury riddled the team is, if they, happen to suffer any more significant injuries, it may be a little bit too much for them to overcome in terms of a playoff matchup. Now, I would say, okay, this is the last, discussion topic of the show. And, how much will Kevin Stefanski rely on the run game for the rest of the season? We look at the past 3 weeks, starting off with Jacksonville, he's really been having Baker Mayfield throw the ball more. And we really haven't seen that, 35, 40-plus rush game with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt that we've seen earlier in the season. And I don't think that Kevin Stefanski is going to run the ball the same way that he did early in the season, just because he's continued to build up that confidence with Baker Mayfield throwing the ball, where he didn't do it with a lot of success too much early in the season and had limited success after the bye week, mostly because of the weather. So in this situation, you look at the Jets, not a very good team. The Giants, they have, some questions in the secondary. This may now be a situation where Baker Mayfield is going to be throwing the ball a lot more. I probably wouldn't be surprised if they try to throw the ball against the Pittsburgh Steelers as well, for Baker Mayfield to, again, build that confidence, against that top tier team and really heading into the playoffs. And then once they get into that playoff matchup, then I see a situation of them really finding that true balance of relying first on the run game, and then in situations where they have to throw the ball or they want to keep the team off balance, then you allow Baker Mayfield to come in. But, again, heading into the end of this season, you want Baker Mayfield to grow that confidence and then rely on your run game to win the time of possession, not force your defense to be on the field as much and really tire out opposing defenses. So once you do get to that end game in the second half, fourth quarter, your running backs are already tiring out that defense, and you've been able to throw the ball, in the second and third quarter to really help build a sort of insurmountable lead against your opposition. And that's really going to be the way for them to end up with a playoff victory. I would say the biggest comparison to understand how the Browns could find success in the playoffs is look at what the Patriots did over the past few years, as Tom Brady really didn't have the greatest options to throw the ball to. Bill Belichick, obviously they had a good defense, but they ran the ball. Teams that win in the playoffs find an ability to run the ball with success. The San Francisco 49ers ran the ball with success. The Kansas City Chiefs found ways to run the ball with success in different matchups. And those are the things you want to see the Browns do. Have a passing offense that's able to extend drives, find different ways to be successful in terms of throwing the ball, and then from there, allow the play action to really continue to set up success for the run game. Now, looking at some matchups to watch, this week, Xavier McKinney, again, he's going to be that player that likely is going to come in and play extended snaps when Logan Ryan does step down from that free safety spot into that nickelback role. This is a situation where you want to see Harrison Bryant, Austin Hooper potentially David Njoku, depending on his health, if they're able to step into that role and really make a big difference. Xavier McKinney has shown an ability, in coverage to be, susceptible to get beat by tight ends, and you want to see them step up. And again, with them missing some cornerbacks, that's going to force some safeties to be out of position to where they would ideally want to be. And this may be an opportunity for those Browns tight ends to step up and really have a big impact, because we haven't really seen too many of those games where the tight ends, they come up, make a lot of big plays. There was that week without Austin Hooper after he had the appendectomy that Harrison Bryant was able to come in and make some plays, and David Njoku as well in terms of scoring touchdowns. And we need to see that again this week with them making an impact to, again, help Baker Mayfield with his confidence heading into the postseason. Looking at another matchup that's going to be very important to watch this game will be Chris Hubbard versus the Giants defensive line. Chris Hubbard will be stepping in for Wyatt Teller this week at that starting right guard position as he's out. So again, you want to see him provide solid play against that Giants interior defensive line that includes Leonard Williams, Dalvin Tomlinson. You may see a situation where he has to go up against a defensive end that's playing at a 3 technique. So, Chris Hubbard has been able to play well this season when stepped into duty. He does have positive Pro Football Focus grades in terms of pass blocking and run blocking around the high 60s, and you want to see him be able to give a serviceable play while Wyatt Teller is dealing with that ankle injury. And then the last matchup to watch for this game is going to be Sheldrick Redwine versus Evan Ingram. Now, Evan Ingram, again, was listed as questionable, but just having a knee injury, it's likely that he's going to go. And Evan Ingram does have a lot of speed, but he's also a bigger target, and they do like to feed him the ball. Again, Colt McCoy throughout his career has shown an ability to get the ball to the tight end. Freddie Kitchens is likely going to find some way to get some quick passes, in the middle of the field to the tight ends. And you want to see Sheldrick Redwine come up and be consistent with his tackling bigger targets like Evan Ingram. So in this situation, you want to see him be able to be consistent in terms of his third level safety protection and also coming in terms of run support as well. But his matchup against Evan Ingram is probably going to be a big one this week. So the 3 keys to victory for the Browns is definitely going to be get pressure on the quarterback. You want to see that from, Joe Woods and being more aggressive with his scheme, getting pressure from the front four with both Myles Garrett, Olivier Vernon, and potentially Adrian Claiborne coming in as rotational end, and when he moves into the interior. 1 or 2, I should say, don't allow the game to turn into a shootout. We've seen a lot of times that the Browns, when they have teams that they should beat, somehow the game has figured out a way to turn into a shootout, and you don't want to see that happen again this week. So you really want the Browns defense to play with confidence, show that they can beat the teams that they need to beat, in dominant fashion. And then, of course, the final key is to continue to execute play action with success. That's how they've been able to throw the ball over the past few games. And again, running the ball will be one of the foundations of finding success in executing their play action. So with the Browns this week, I do have them winning against the Giants 28-17. This is a game where the Browns, again, want to continue to build up the confidence of Baker Mayfield, find that identity on defense, and get back in the win column to continue their pursuit for their first playoff berth since 2002. I want to thank you guys again for joining me for the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show, which is sponsored by Focus Clothing. I actually have one of their Focus tees that came out earlier this summer. Make sure you guys check out the website, as there are new Focus Friends logo crew sweaters on their website. They're great. Again, they use top premium cotton fabrics on their sweaters, their hoodies. They also have trucker hats as well, regular snapbacks if you guys want to check that out. Going to be a great gift. You can support a small business here in Cleveland. You can there's shipping where you can go all across the country. Again, make sure you guys check that out. Focus Clothing CLE. Thank you guys so much. I will see you on the Cleveland Browns New York Giants live game thread. I'll be on that for the whole game over on the Sports Illustrated website. That's at sportsillustrated.com/NFL/Browns. And I'll see you at the thread. Peace.